inflation is about to hit 6%. That's the highest rate since the early 90s, when the Conservatives have been in power for over a decade. That fears about inflation were unfounded. But working people across the country are starting the new year facing rising bills and ballooning prices. So how did he get it so wrong? Millions of British workers now face a further pay cut, and his Chancellor is handing them a tax hike.
Katie Hopkins just delivered a blistering takedown of Angela Rayner that has left Labour scrambling for answers. In an unexpected moment of raw television, Hopkins confronted Rayner with evidence of her working-class betrayal that sent shockwaves through Westminster. While Rayner portrays herself as a champion of ordinary families, Hopkins revealed a pattern of luxury living that stands in stark contrast to her public image. The disconnect between Rayner's words and actions raises serious questions about Labour's commitment to the very people they claim to represent. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Behind Rayner's carefully crafted working-class champion image lies a troubling reality that Katie Hopkins didn't hesitate to expose. While Rayner presents herself as the voice of ordinary Britons struggling with economic hardships, her actions tell a completely different story.
We'll know somebody at the moment who is trapped either in rented accommodation, or they're in, substandard accommodation, or they're in temporary accommodation, because we don't have the social housing we need in this country.
Well, yes, you say you want decent homes for everybody, but you're the one that decided that Labour Lords should vote against the government's nutrient neutrality plans, which they claim would have seen 100,000 new homes built.
To get round the table to make that happen, we put an amendment down which could have delivered on the programme. The government weren't listening. We don't believe that you have to wreck our environment to deliver the homes. We can do both of those things.
What's particularly revealing is Rayner's tendency to avoid substantive engagement with the press. As Hopkins pointedly observed, instead of addressing tough questions about Labour's economic strategy, Rayner opts for carefully orchestrated media appearances where challenging inquiries are conveniently sidestepped. These stage-managed events might look good on camera, but they fail to address the genuine concerns of the public who are desperately seeking real solutions. The disconnect becomes even more glaring when examining Rayner's response to the cost of living crisis. With energy bills and housing costs reaching unprecedented heights, working families are feeling the squeeze from all directions. Yet, as Hopkins highlighted, Labour has failed to present any coherent plan to ease these burdens. The absence of concrete proposals raises serious questions about whether Rayner truly understands the struggles she claims to represent.
Well, one of the challenges we face because of the Conservatives crashed the economy and the situation we're going to inherit is that we won't be able to reverse everything that the Conservatives have done over the last 13 years. The house building that I'm proposing at the start of conference that we'll be announcing more this week is about actually giving people secure futures and making sure that we can tackle things like child poverty. But we've had 13 years of Conservative failure, a crashed economy, so we're going to inherit a very difficult programme if we were lucky enough to win the next general election, and therefore we're realistic about what we're able to achieve, but we will change Britain for the better.
Perhaps most damning is Hopkins's assessment of Rayner's authenticity. The fiery political commentator cut through the performative aspects of Rayner's public persona, suggesting that her working-class credentials are more style than substance. This disconnection isn't merely a question of image, but reflects a fundamental inability to translate policy decisions into meaningful improvements for ordinary families. When confronted with economic challenges, Labour's default position appears to be shifting blame rather than taking responsibility. Hopkins criticized this approach as revealing a party unprepared for leadership. More concerning is Labour's tax and spend philosophy, which Hopkins warned could lead to economic stagnation and create even greater hardships for the very working-class families Rayner claims to champion. The hypocrisy reaches its peak when examining the lifestyle choices of Labour's top brass. Hopkins didn't mince words when pointing out that many leading Labour MPs, Rayner included, enjoy comfortable living standards while advocating higher taxes for others. This double standard fundamentally undermines their credibility as representatives of working people and exposes a profound contradiction at the heart of Labour's messaging. The economic contradictions in Labour's policies only scratch the surface of a more disturbing pattern. Katie Hopkins has identified something far more ominous at play. a systematic effort to control not just policy, but permissible thought itself. Labor is increasingly pushing to control what people can say and hear, Hopkins warned, exposing a concerning shift in how the party approaches public discourse. The warning signs appear in Labor's treatment of media outlets that dare to challenge their narrative. Hopkins highlighted the party's targeted campaign against GB News and conservative commentators who refuse to fall in line with approved talking points. This isn't merely about disagreeing with opposing viewpoints. It represents a coordinated strategy to eliminate platforms where dissenting opinions can be expressed at all. Perhaps most alarming is Labor's proposed speech regulations that Hopkins scrutinized in her analysis. While packaged as protections for vulnerable communities, these measures contain troubling provisions that could easily criminalize legitimate political criticism. The vague language and broad application create a chilling effect where citizens must constantly second-guess whether their political opinions might suddenly become illegal. The hypocrisy becomes impossible to ignore when examining Labor's recent decision to cancel local elections, a move Hopkins condemned as fundamentally undermining democratic accountability. How can a party claim to champion democratic values while simultaneously eliminating citizens' opportunities to express their will through voting? This contradiction reveals a disturbing comfort with power consolidation at the expense of democratic principles. Labor's media engagement strategy further confirms Hopkins' assessment. Rather than addressing challenging questions with substantive responses, Labor representatives consistently retreat to prepackaged talking points and deflection tactics. Hopkins observed that this approach prioritizes controlling narratives over transparency and accountability, creating an environment where meaningful debate becomes impossible. The implications stretch far beyond partisan politics. As Hopkins pointedly asked, "What happens to a democracy when only approved speech is permitted?" The answer becomes increasingly clear. Democracy itself cannot survive in an environment where government determines which questions can be asked and which criticisms may be voiced. The foundation of free society rests on the ability to challenge those in power, precisely what Labor seems determined to prevent. What Hopkins has ultimately revealed goes beyond mere political disagreements. History shows us that when political figures disconnect from their constituents, trust erodes and polarization intensifies. This pattern has repeated throughout democratic societies, often preceding the collapse of once dominant political parties and the rise of populist alternatives. The confrontation between Hopkins and Rayner symbolizes a broader crisis in British politics, one where carefully crafted personas have replaced genuine representation. When leaders prioritize image management over tackling kitchen table issues, they create a dangerous vacuum. This leadership void doesn't just disappoint voters, it fundamentally threatens democratic stability. As trust continues to erode, the British public must recognize their power to demand more than empty rhetoric. The greatest protection against political manipulation isn't found in carefully staged press conferences or slick social media campaigns, but in an engaged citizenry willing to hold their representatives accountable for results rather than reassurances.